A sergeant humiliated the nurse in the mess hall. Then her Navy SEAL dragon tattoo froze the military base. The sound wasn't just a dropped tray, it was a declaration of war. Stainless steel clashed against the linoleum floor of the mess hall, shattering the low hum of lunchtime conversation. 300 soldiers went silent instantly. In the center of the room, Sergeant Miller stood like a tower of arrogant muscle, his boot resting heavily on a spilled carton of milk that was currently bleeding white across the pristine scrubs of the woman kneeling before him. "I said," Miller sneered, his voice carrying to the back of the room, "watch where you're walking, sweetheart. Or did they not teach you spatial awareness in nursing school?" Chloe didn't flinch. She didn't look up. She just stared at the white puddle soaking into the knee of her pants, her expression unreadable. But Captain Logan Vance, watching from the corner table, saw what the others missed. Her hands weren't shaking. They were perfectly, terrifyingly still. The mess hall at Fort Bragg smelled of industrial cleaner, overcooked green beans, and testosterone. It was a kingdom of hierarchy, where the stripe on your sleeve or the bar on your collar dictated the air you breathed. For the last 3 weeks, Chloe had tried to breathe as little of it as possible. She was a ghost in the machine. A transfer from a base nobody had heard of, assigned to the night shift in the ICU. She walked with a slight limp that she tried to hide, kept her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun, and spoke only when medically necessary. She had no friends, ate alone, and never attended the morale events on Friday nights. In a closed ecosystem like a military base, silence was suspicious. Isolation was a target. Sergeant First Class Miller had decided she was his target on day 1. Miller was the kind of NCO who confused cruelty with leadership. He was loud, boisterous, and had a combat patch that he made sure everyone saw, though rumors in the barracks suggested his combat experience involved a lot of radio watch and very little trigger time. He fed on the weak, or at least those he perceived as weak. Chloe, with her quiet demeanor and refusal to flirt back at his aggressive jokes, was an affront to his ego. "You going to clean that up, Lieutenant?" Miller asked, dropping the mocking honorific like an insult. Technically, as a nurse, she was an officer. Technically, she outranked him. But in the chow hall, rank often bowed to the social dynamics of the infantry. Chloe slowly reached for a napkin. "It was an accident, Sergeant," she said, her voice low, raspy, as if she hadn't used it in days. "You bumped into me." "I bumped into you?" Miller laughed, looking around at his table of subordinates for validation. They chuckled nervously. "Did you hear that? The lieutenant thinks I'm clumsy. I think you were too busy daydreaming about some doctor to watch your step." Logan Vance watched the scene unfold from 3 tables away. He took a slow sip of his black coffee, his eyes narrowing. Logan wasn't Army. He was Navy, a SEAL team leader on a joint training exchange to coordinate urban warfare tactics. He didn't answer to Miller, and he didn't technically answer to the base commander for anything other than logistics. He had noticed Chloe before. Not because she was beautiful, though under the fluorescent lights and exhaustion, she possessed a striking, sharp-edged sort of beauty, but because of how she moved. Civilians walked with no purpose. Soldiers walked with a cadence. Chloe moved like she was clearing a room. She checked exits. She sat with her back to the wall. She scanned sectors. It was subtle, buried under layers of fatigue. But Logan recognized the muscle memory of a predator pretending to be prey. "Just let me clean it up," Chloe said, her hand hovering over the tray. "No," Miller said, stepping closer. He loomed over her, blocking the overhead light. "I think you need to apologize for ruining my boots. These are standard issue, but I keep them polished. Milk is a bitch to get out of leather." The air in the room grew heavy. This was crossing a line. Bullying was one thing, public humiliation of a commissioned officer, even a nurse, was a court-martial offence if the wrong person saw it. But Miller was banking on the fact that no one cared about the quiet, limping girl from the ICU. "I'm sorry about your boots, Sergeant," Chloe said. It wasn't a submission, it was a tactical withdrawal. She just wanted to leave. "Not good enough," Miller spat. He kicked the tray, sending it skittering across the floor. Stand up, and address me properly." Chloe froze. Her hand, which had been reaching for the spilled apple, stopped in mid-air. For a second, the mess hall was so quiet you could hear the hum of the refrigerators. Logan set his coffee cup down. He didn't stand up yet, but his muscles coiled. He was curious. He wanted to see what she would do, because he saw the shift in her shoulders, the slight rotation of her hip. She wasn't scared. She was calculating the distance between her fist and his throat. "I said stand up!" Miller barked, reaching down. It happened fast, but to Logan it played out in slow motion. Miller made a mistake. He didn't just yell. He put his hands on her. He grabbed Chloe by the upper arm of her scrub top, his fingers digging into the loose blue fabric, intending to haul her to her feet like an unruly private. "Don't touch me," Chloe whispered. The rasp was gone. Her voice was cold steel. "I'll touch you whenever I—" Chloe didn't strike him. She didn't need to. As Miller yanked her upward, she twisted her body with a fluidity that defied her limp. She grounded her weight, locking her stance. The sudden resistance against Miller's pull resulted in a sharp, tearing sound. The cheap fabric of the standard-issue hospital scrubs gave way. The right sleeve of Chloe's top ripped from the shoulder seam down to the elbow, flapping open to reveal the skin beneath. Miller stumbled back, the torn fabric in his hand. "Look at that," he sneered, ready to make a comment about her undershirt. "You wearing—" The words died in his throat. The silence that followed was different from before. Before, it was awkward tension. Now, it was the vacuum of absolute shock. Chloe wasn't wearing an undershirt. Her arm was bare, pale, and toned with lean muscle. But it was the ink that sucked the oxygen out of the room. Covering her entire right deltoid and wrapping down her bicep was a masterpiece of scarring and ink. It wasn't just a tattoo, it was a history book written in flesh. The centerpiece was a dragon, aggressive and coiled, rendered in black and grey realism. But it wasn't a generic fantasy beast. It was wrapped around a golden trident, the unmistakable Budweiser of the Navy SEALs, and woven through the dragon's claws were poppy flowers and coordinates. 34.52 degrees north, 69.15 degrees east, Kabul. But it was the color that froze the blood of the veterans in the room. The dragon's eyes were red. In the unspoken code of special operations, specifically within the tight-knit, secretive community of DevGru, SEAL Team 6, and their support elements, red eyes on a dragon didn't just mean you served. It meant you were the sole survivor of a compromised extraction. It meant you had walked through hell and everyone else had burned. Miller stared at the arm. He was an infantryman, but he knew iconography. He knew that nurses didn't get trident tattoos. He knew that stolen valor accusations usually flew fast and loose, but you didn't steal that tattoo. That was a kill-on-sight offense for the teams if you hadn't earned it. And the scars around it, burn marks, shrapnel pitting that the ink had been skillfully worked around, proved she hadn't gotten this at a parlor in a strip mall. Chloe stood up slowly. She didn't try to cover her arm. She let the torn sleeve hang. She looked at Miller, and for the first time she raised her chin. Her eyes, usually cast down, were blazing with a cold, dead light. "You wanted my attention, Sergeant?" she asked. Miller's mouth opened and closed like a fish. He took a step back, his bravado evaporating like mist in a hurricane. He looked at the trident. then at her face. You can't have that. That's a SEAL trident." "Is it?" Chloe asked, taking a step toward him. The entire mess hall was paralyzed. A few chairs scraped as officers from the far side stood up to get a better look. "That's stolen valor," Miller whispered, though his voice shook. He was trying to convince himself. "You're a nurse. You're a damn female nurse." Chloe laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Stolen," she repeated. She looked down at the dragon, then back at him. "Do you know what red wings means, Sergeant? Do you know what extortion 17 means?" Miller blinked. Every soldier knew those names. Tragedies. Legends. "I didn't steal anything," Chloe said, her voice dropping to a register that carried pure menace. "I paid for it in liters of blood, mine and theirs." She took another step. Miller retreated until his back hit the table behind him. "Now," Chloe said, pointing to the spilled milk. "Pick it up." The standoff was broken by the scrape of a chair. Captain Logan Vance stood up. He didn't rush. He walked with the heavy, predatory grace of an apex predator, entering a clearing. He crossed the mess hall in 12 strides, the crowd parting for him instinctively. He was in his dress khakis, the gold trident on his own chest catching the light. He stopped between Chloe and Miller. He didn't look at Chloe yet. He looked at Miller. "Sergeant," Logan said. His voice was calm, conversational, which made it infinitely more terrifying than Miller's shouting. "Sir!" Miller snapped to attention, sweating profusely. She's wearing unauthorized insignia. You were just bullying a woman you thought couldn't fight back," Logan corrected. He looked down at the spilled milk, then at the torn sleeve. "And now you've assaulted a superior officer." "Sir, the tattoo—" "I see it," Logan said. He finally turned to Chloe. Up close, she looked exhausted. The adrenaline was holding her up, but he could see the tremors starting in her hands now. He looked at the ink. He knew the artist. He knew the style. It was Old Man Pete's work, out of Virginia Beach. Pete didn't ink anyone who hadn't been vetted. Logan looked at the coordinates. He looked at the dragon. And then he saw the small initials hidden in the dragon's smoke. J.V. Logan's heart hammered against his ribs. J.V. Justin Vance, his brother. The world tilted on its axis. Logan felt a ringing in his ears. Justin had died 4 years ago in a blown-up safe house in the Petch Valley. The official report said the team was wiped out. No survivors. The bodies were recovered days later. They said a cultural support team, CST, female attached to the unit, had been KIA as well. But the woman standing in front of him had JV inked into her skin, wrapped in a survivor's dragon. Logan looked at Chloe's face, really looked at her. He stripped away the fatigue, the bun, the scrubs. He saw the structure of her jaw, the eyes that had seen too much. "Lieutenant," Logan said, his voice straining to stay professional. Chloe met his gaze. She saw his trident. Her eyes flickered to his nameplate. Vance. She flinched. It was the first time she had shown true emotion. Her breath hitched, a tiny, sharp intake of air. She recognized the name. She recognized the face. "Captain," she whispered. "Sergeant Miller," Logan said, not breaking eye contact with Chloe. "You have 5 seconds to disappear. If I see you again today, I will have your rank. If I see you near this officer again, I will have your career. Move!" Miller didn't hesitate. He scrambled away, his boots slipping on the linoleum, vanishing into the crowd. The silence in the mess hall lingered. 300 pairs of eyes were glued to the 2 officers. Logan took off his uniform jacket. It was a breach of protocol, but he didn't care. He draped it gently over Chloe's shoulders, covering the torn scrub top and the dragon that had just rewritten the base's social order. "Cover up," Logan said softly. "The show's over." Chloe pulled the jacket tight, her fingers gripping the lapels. She smelled like antiseptic and old sweat. He smelled like starch and expensive cologne. "You're Justin's brother," she said. It wasn't a question. "And you," Logan said, his voice rough with suppressed emotion, "are the ghost that wasn't supposed to exist." "I have to go," Chloe said suddenly. Panic flared in her eyes. The adrenaline dump was hitting her. She stepped around him, moving toward the exit with her uneven gait. "Chloe!" Logan called out. He didn't use her rank. She stopped at the double doors, her back to him. "We need to talk," he said. "There's nothing to say," she replied, her voice breaking. "He's dead. They're all dead. And I'm just a nurse." She pushed through the doors and into the blinding afternoon sun, leaving Logan standing in the middle of a stunned mess hall, realized that the war he thought was over had just walked back into his life. The whispers started the second the doors swung shut. Phones came out, texts were flying. The nurse, the tattoo, the SEAL captain. By nightfall, everyone on base would know that the quiet girl in the ICU was dangerous. But only Logan knew that she held the key to the worst night of his life. And he wasn't going to let her disappear again. Fort Bragg didn't sleep. It just lowered its voice. By 1900 hours, the sun had dipped below the pine line, casting long, jagged shadows across the base. But the rumor mill was spinning faster than the rotors on the flight line. The story had mutated, as military rumors always do. In one version, the nurse had broken Miller's arm. In another, she was a covert operative, hiding in plain sight. Captain Logan Vance ignored the whispers as he walked through the sterile, white corridors of Womack Army Medical Center. He wasn't interested in rumors. He was interested in the ghost who had just walked out of the mess hall, wearing his dead brother's memory on her skin. He still had the scent of her fear and her resolve in his mind. J.V. Justin Vance. The initials were small, hidden in the smoke of the dragon tattoo, but to Logan, they were screaming. "I'm looking for Lieutenant Chloe Mercer," Logan told the charge nurse at the ICU station. He used the name he'd pulled from the base directory after a frantic 30 minutes of making calls to friends in personnel. The charge nurse, a formidable woman in her 50s, peered over her glasses. "She's not on shift, Captain. And if you're here about the incident, she's already been summoned to the commander's office for 0800 tomorrow." "I'm not here for the commander," Logan said, leaning in, his voice low. "I'm family." The nurse hesitated, then softened slightly. "She lives in the bachelor officer quarters on the north side." "But Captain?" "She doesn't take visitors. Ever." Logan didn't wait for permission. He drove his rental truck to the BOQ, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The north side was older, quiet, surrounded by the towering pines that made North Carolina feel claustrophobic at night. He found her unit, number 4B. The lights were off. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again, harder. "Chloe, I know you're in there. My jacket is still with you." Silence. Then, the sound of a deadbolt sliding back. The door opened 3 inches. Chloe stood there, still in her scrub pants, but wearing a grey, oversized hoodie now. She looked smaller without the adrenaline of the mess hall holding her up. Her hair was down, wet from a shower, framing a face that was pale and drawn. "You can have your jacket back," she said, her voice devoid of the steel she'd shown Miller. She handed the folded dress uniform through the crack. Logan didn't take it. He put his hand on the door, holding it open. "I don't want the jacket. I want to know why my brother's initials are on your arm." "Go away, Logan," she whispered. "Please, You don't know what you're digging up." "I know the official report," Logan said, stepping into the jam so she couldn't close the door. "Ambush in Pesh Valley. RPG to the safe house. Total loss. Bodies recovered 3 days later. Closed casket. That's what the Navy told my mother. That's what they told me." Chloe flinched at the words closed casket. Her eyes squeezed shut for a second, a spasm of pain crossing her features. "They lied," Logan said, his voice rough. "If you were there, if you have that ink, they lied about something. Was he alive when you left him?" Chloe's eyes snapped open. The sorrow in them was replaced by a flash of anger. "Left him? You think I left him?" She threw the door open, abandoning her defense. "Come in. But if you cross the threshold, you leave your rank outside. Because what I have to say doesn't belong in an official report." Logan stepped inside. The apartment was sparse, no photos on the walls, no personal clutter, just books, a yoga mat, and a duffel bag on the couch that was half-packed. "You're running," Logan observed, looking at the bag. "I'm relocating," Chloe corrected, walking to the small kitchenette. She didn't offer him a drink. She just leaned against the counter, crossing her arms over her chest, protecting the tattoo beneath the hoodie. "Miller will file a report. The investigation will start. They'll look at my service record, see the redactions, and then the wrong people will start asking questions. I can't be here for that." "Who are you, Chloe?" Logan asked, standing in the middle of the living room. Nurses don't get attached to DEVGRU. Cultural support teams were phased out of direct action years before that mission. "I wasn't just a nurse," Chloe said softly. "I was an enabler, medical intelligence. My job was to go where the bearded boys couldn't, into the women's quarters, into the clinics, to build trust and map the networks." She looked up at him, and for a moment the resemblance to Justin was painful. Not in her looks, but in her eyes, the 1,000-yard stare of someone who has seen the elephant. "Justin didn't die in the safe house," she said. The air left the room. Logan felt his knees weaken. He reached out and gripped the back of a chair. "What?" "The report was a cover," Chloe said, the words spilling out fast now, like she had been holding them in for 4 years. "We were compromised 3 clicks out. We took fire from the ridges. It was a kill box. We fell back to the safe house, but they were waiting." She pulled up the sleeve of her hoodie. She didn't look at the dragon this time. She looked at the scar tissue, running jagged white lines through the ink. "He pushed me into a cellar," Chloe said, her voice trembling. "The roof was collapsing. The RPGs were hitting the structure. He took 3 rounds to the chest, Logan. He was bleeding out. He threw me into the root cellar and kicked the rug over the trap door." Logan stared at her, his vision blurring. "He died on top of that door," Chloe whispered, tears finally spilling over. "He sat on it. He defended it until he couldn't lift his rifle. And then he just sat there. His weight kept it shut. I could hear him breathing through the cracks in the wood. I could hear him calling your name." Logan made a sound, half sob, half growl. He sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. "I was down there for 2 days, Chloe said, her voice hollow, listening to them search, listening to the silence after he stopped breathing. When the QRF finally cleared the site, they had to move his body to get me out." She walked over to him, hesitating, then placed a hand on his shoulder. "I didn't leave him, Logan. He saved me. I'm the reason he's dead." The silence in the apartment was heavy, filled with the ghosts of the Pesh Valley. Logan sat there for a long time, processing the rewriting of his family's tragedy. He had spent 4 years imagining Justin dying instantly in an explosion. A clean, soldier's death. The reality was messier, more painful, and infinitely more heroic. "He never mentioned you," Logan said finally, lifting his head. His eyes were red but dry. "We emailed every week. He never said a word about a Chloe." "Protocol," Chloe said, moving to sit on the coffee table across from him. "And complication. We weren't supposed to be close." Logan looked at her sharply. "Close?" Chloe managed a sad, fleeting smile. "It's hard not to fall in love in a war zone, Logan. Everything is heightened. You live in 24-hour bursts. We knew it was against regs. We knew it wouldn't work back in the real world. But out there?" She touched the tattoo again. "He was my anchor." "Does anyone else know?" Logan asked. "About the cellar?" "My handler," Chloe said. "And the command. They scrubbed it. Heroic defensive position sounds better than compromised mission due to bad intel. If they admit I was there, they have to admit why I was there, and that exposes the intelligence failure. So I became a ghost. They gave me a medal in a closed room, a new assignment, and told me to forget." "But you didn't," Logan gestured to her arm. "I tried," she said. "I transferred to nursing. I tried to be normal, but the silence. It's loud, isn't it?" "Yeah," Logan said. "It is." He looked at the duffel bag again. "You can't run, Chloe. Not this time." "Miller isn't going to let this go," she argued. "He's a petty tyrant with a bruised ego. He'll dig. He'll find out I was discharged for medical reasons, PTSD, and then rehired as a civilian contractor before recommissioning. He'll twist it." "Let him try," Logan said. A cold, dangerous calm settled over him. "You're under my protection now." "I don't need protection," Chloe snapped, her independence flaring. "I survived the Taliban, Captain. I can handle a mediocre E7. "It's not about what you can handle," Logan said, standing up. "It's about what you shouldn't have to. You carried his memory alone for 4 years. You don't have to do that anymore." He walked to the door. "Unpack your bag, Chloe. You're coming to the base gala tomorrow night." Chloe blinked, blindsided. "Excuse me?" "The morale gala. I'd rather eat glass." "It's mandatory attendance for officers," Logan lied smoothly. "And more importantly, if you hide, Miller wins. If you run, the rumors win. You walk in there, head high, with a Navy SEAL captain as your escort, and nobody will dare ask you about that tattoo again." "This is a bad idea," Chloe said, shaking her head. "Probably," Logan admitted, opening the door. "But Justin would have loved it. He always liked stirring the pot." Chloe looked at him, and for the first time, the tension in her shoulders dropped. "He did," she murmured. "He really did." "I'll pick you up at 1900, Logan said. "Wear something that covers the arm. Let's make them wonder." The following day was a lesson in psychological warfare. Logan went about his duties at the Joint Operations Center, reviewing urban breach protocols, but his presence was a deterrent. Every time he walked into a room, conversations died. He knew the text chains were burning up. The SEAL knows her. They have a history. Good. Let them theorize. It kept them from the truth. Chloe, meanwhile, reported to her shift at the ICU. The atmosphere was frosty. The other nurses, who usually ignored her, now watched her with a mixture of fear and jealousy. She went about her rounds with mechanical precision, checking vitals, changing dressings, ignoring the whispers. At 1600, she clocked out and headed for the parking lot. The sun was hot, baking the asphalt. She was halfway to her car, a beat-up Jeep, when she felt the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She stopped. She didn't turn around. She checked her reflection in the window of a parked sedan next to her. Sergeant Miller was behind her, about 20 feet back, flanked by 2 other soldiers. They weren't in uniform. They were in civvies, jeans and t-shirts, but the aggression was uniform. "Leaving so soon, Lieutenant?" Miller called out. His nose was bandaged, a souvenir from where he must have tripped or punched a wall in frustration after the mess hall. Chloe turned slowly. She was tired. She didn't have the energy for this. "Go home, Miller." "Not until we settle this," Miller said, closing the distance. The parking lot was empty. Shift change had just ended. "I made some calls. My buddy in Infinite Records says your file is locked tight. Classified. That usually means you're either a spook or a fraud. I'm betting on fraud." "You lost that bet yesterday," Chloe said, clutching her car keys. The metal of the key bit into her palm, a makeshift weapon. "Yesterday you caught me off guard," Miller sneered. He looked at his friends. "She thinks she's tough, thinks because she spread her legs for some seal, she gets to wear the trident." The insult was crude, predictable, and effective. It wasn't aimed at her. It was aimed at Justin. Chloe didn't see red. She saw clarity. "You want to test that theory?" she asked quietly. Miller grinned. He thought he had her. He thought she was a petite woman in scrubs facing 3 large men. He stepped forward, reaching for her shoulder again, the same mistake he made in the mess hall. "I think I'm going to rip that shirt off and see if the ink washes off." He lunged. This time, Chloe didn't just stand her ground. She moved. As Miller's hand came for her, she stepped inside his guard. It was a counterintuitive move, bringing her closer to the threat. She drove her forearm into his throat while simultaneously sweeping his lead leg. It was a Krav Maga takedown, brutal and efficient. Miller gagged, his feet leaving the ground, and he slammed onto the asphalt hard enough to knock the wind out of him. Before his friends could react, Chloe was on one knee, her forearm pressed against Miller's windpipe, pinning him to the ground. She didn't look at the friends. She stared directly into Miller's watering eyes. "The man who gave me this tattoo," she hissed, her face inches from his, "killed 6 insurgents with the entrenching tool to keep me safe. You are not in his league. You are not even in his species." "Get off him!" one of the friends yelled, rushing forward. "I wouldn't." A deep voice rumbled from behind them. The friend froze. Logan was leaning against the side of a truck 2 rows over. He had been there the whole time. He was wearing sunglasses and a t-shirt that showed off arms that made Miller's look like twigs. "Captain," the friend stammered. "She had it handled," Logan said, pushing off the truck and walking over. He looked down at Chloe, who was still pinning Miller. The ferocity in her face was breathtaking. It was the same look Justin used to get before a breach. "But I hate paperwork. Let him up, Chloe." Chloe held the pin for 1 more second, letting Miller feel the pressure, letting him know she could crush his larynx if she chose. Then she released him and stood up, smoothing her scrubs. Miller rolled over, coughing and gasping, clutching his throat. "This is the 2nd time," Logan said to the gasping sergeant. "Strike 3, and you won't be waking up in the hospital. You'll be waking up in the brig." Miller scrambled to his feet, humiliated, avoiding eye contact. He signaled his friends, and they retreated to their car, tires screeching as they peeled out of the lot. Chloe leaned against her Jeep, her hand starting to tremble again as the adrenaline faded. "You were watching," she accused, though there was no heat in it. "I wanted to see if you needed help," Logan said, stopping in front of her. "Clearly I underestimated you. Again." "He insulted Justin," Chloe said, looking at her hands. "I know," Logan said. He reached out, hesitating, then gently took her hand. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, which were white from gripping the keys. "You're a warrior, Chloe. Justin knew it. I'm starting to see it." The touch was electric. It was the first time they had touched skin to skin without violence or fabric between them. Chloe looked up at him, her blue eyes wide. There was a pull there, a magnetic, dangerous pull, born of shared grief and sudden adrenaline. "The gala," she said breathlessly, trying to change the subject. 1900, Logan confirmed, not letting go of her hand. "Wear a dress, I'll bring the firepower." "What kind of firepower?" Logan smirked, a glimpse of the reckless charm his brother used to have. "The truth. We're going to walk into the lion's den, and we're going to make sure every person in that room knows exactly who you are. No more hiding in the cellar." Chloe squeezed his hand back, just once, before pulling away. "I don't have a dress." "Then we have 3 hours," Logan said. "Get in the truck." As they drove off base, leaving the scene of the fight behind, neither noticed the black sedan parked in the far corner of the lot. The window rolled up slowly. Inside, Colonel Blackwood, the base intelligence officer, lowered his camera. He looked at the photo of Chloe pinning Miller, then at the file on his lap, marked Operation Red Wings 2. Classified. "Found you," he whispered. The Fort Bragg Officers' Club had been scrubbed of its usual utilitarian atmosphere. Tonight it was a theater of war disguised as a ballroom. The air smelled of expensive perfume, starch, and the metallic tang of brass polish. White linens draped every surface. Crystal glassware caught the fractured light of the chandeliers, and the room was a sea of dress blues, army greens, and mess dress uniforms. It was a kingdom of hierarchy, where every glance was a political calculation, and every handshake a test of grip strength. At 19:05 hours, the low hum of conversation, the trading of favors and gossip, was severed by a sudden, heavy silence. It started near the double mahogany doors and rippled outward like a shock wave, until the only sound was the clinking of a lone fork against a plate. Captain Logan Vance stood at the top of the grand staircase. In his dress whites, he looked every inch the poster boy for naval special warfare. Tall, broad-shouldered, his chest a heavy armor of ribbons that included the Silver Star and the Purple Heart. He was a man who had walked through fire and come out the other side hardened. But tonight, no one was looking at him. Every eye in the room was fixed on the woman gripping his arm. Chloe had taken Logan's advice to stop hiding, but she had interpreted it on her own terms. She hadn't chosen a modest gown to blend in. She wore a floor-length dress of midnight blue silk that seemed to pour over her athletic frame like water. It was elegant, sophisticated, and lethal. It had a high slit up the left leg, revealing the faint trace of a shrapnel scar on her thigh. But the true weapon was the neckline. It was asymmetrical, leaving her right shoulder completely bare. She didn't cover the dragon. She framed it. The tattoo, vibrant and terrifying against her pale skin, was on full display for the first time in 4 years. The red eyes of the beast seemed to scan the room, glowing with a malevolent intelligence. The golden trident, woven into the dragon's claws, caught the chandelier light and threw it back with a defiance that made the nearby infantry officers uncomfortable. It was a challenge. It was a scream in a quiet room. I am here. I am real. I am not a rumor. Breathe, Logan whispered, leaning close enough that his breath stirred the hair near her ear. He could feel her hand trembling where it clutched his bicep, her fingers digging into the wool of his jacket. I'm trying, Chloe murmured through a fixed smile, her chin held high, though her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. They're staring, all of them, even the general's wife. Let them stare, Logan said, his voice a low rumble of reassurance. They've never seen a queen before. Keep your head up. You earned every inch of that ink." They began to descend the stairs. It was a slow, deliberate march. The crowd at the bottom parted instinctively, creating a wide corridor. Officers who had ignored Chloe for weeks, who had looked through her in the corridors as if she were furniture, now stepped back with a mixture of confusion and newfound respect. The visual language of the tattoo, combined with the endorsement of a highly decorated SEAL captain, had rewritten her status instantly. She wasn't just a quiet nurse with a limp anymore. She was read in. She was part of the tribe. They moved to the bar, the crowd closing in behind them like water in a wake. Logan ordered a whiskey. Neat. Chloe asked for ice water, her throat too dry for anything else. "You realize," a voice drawled from behind them, dripping with false concern, "that you're violating about a dozen uniform regulations regarding visible tattoos for officers. AR 670-1 is quite specific." They turned slowly. Colonel Blackwood stood there, holding a glass of champagne by the stem. He was a small man, with sharp, predatory eyes, and a smile that didn't reach them. He was the base's senior intelligence officer, a man who traded in secrets and ruined careers from behind a desk. Flanking him were 2 military police officers, their hands resting near their belts, and Sergeant Miller. Miller looked like he had been dragged there against his will. His dress uniform was ill-fitting, straining at the buttons, and his face was a mask of sweaty vindictiveness. He wouldn't meet Chloe's eyes. "Colonel," Logan said, his voice dropping an octave, shifting from social to tactical. "I didn't know intel came out of the basement for parties. I thought you preferred reading other people's mail." "We go where the interesting assets are," Blackwood said, his eyes fixated on Chloe's arm, dissecting the ink. "And Lieutenant Mercer is certainly interesting. The personnel file I pulled on her was surprisingly empty, heavily redacted. That usually means one of 2 things. You're a spook or you're a fraud. Until I made a call to a contact at SOCOM, I wasn't sure." Chloe went rigid, the glass of water trembling in her hand. This was her nightmare, the exposure. "It seems," Blackwood continued, taking a step closer, invading her personal space, "that the lieutenant is a walking, talking, classified document. And I'm afraid, Captain, that her presence here, flaunting operation specifics on her skin in a room full of uncleared personnel, is a severe security risk." Miller smirked, finding his courage now that he had a colonel in front of him. "I told you, sir. She's a liability. She's stolen valor, wrapped in a pretty dress." "I'm going to have to ask you to come with us, Lieutenant," Blackwood said, signaling the MPs with a flick of his fingers. Quietly. "We need to debrief you on exactly how much you remember about Petch Valley. And we'll need to photograph that arm for evidence before we have it removed." The music from the string quartet seemed to stop, though the musicians played on, their melody lost in the sudden vacuum of tension. A circle had formed around the confrontation, the gala attendees transforming into a coliseum crowd waiting for blood. This was the trap Chloe had feared for 4 years. The military bureaucracy was coming to finish what the Taliban had started, erasing her existence. Chloe took a step back, her breath hitching in her throat. She looked at the stone-faced MPS, then up at Logan. "Logan," she whispered, the fight draining out of her. Logan didn't step back. He stepped between them. He moved with a sudden, violent grace, placing his broad back to Chloe and facing Blackwood down. "She's not going anywhere, Colonel." "This isn't your jurisdiction, Captain," Blackwood snapped, his veneer of politeness cracking. "This is an army base. She is an army officer, and she is displaying sensitive mission data that endangers national security." "That data," Logan said, his voice carrying to the back of the room, "is a memorial. And she isn't just an army officer. She is the surviving primary witness of Operation Red Wings 2. Which is classified, Blackwood hissed, glancing around nervously. You are confirming a black operation in a ballroom. Stand down, Captain, or I will have you in irons alongside her. I'm declassifying the relevant context, Logan said, his voice rising, commanding the room with the authority of a man who had led men into death. He reached into his interior jacket pocket. The MPs tensed, hands drifting to their holsters, anticipating a weapon. Logan pulled out a folded, yellowed piece of paper. It was stained with something dark that looked like dried mud or old blood. He unfolded it with reverence. It was a letter. This, Logan said, holding it up for the room to see, was in my brother's personal effects. It was mailed 2 days before he died. It never arrived because it was held in a vetting queue for 4 years. I retrieved it from his storage unit this morning. That was a lie. He had found it hours ago, breaking a few locks to get to it. But the room didn't need to know that. Read it, Logan commanded, shoving the paper into Blackwood's chest. Read it out loud, Colonel. Blackwood hesitated, looking at the paper as if it were a bomb. He adjusted his glasses, his eyes scanning the page. As he read, his face paled, the smugness draining away to leave a hollow shock. I said read it, Logan barked. Blackwood cleared his throat, his voice thin. Request for field commendation regarding cultural support asset attached to Team 2. Logan snatched the letter back, frustrated by the colonel's lack of conviction. He turned to the crowd, addressing the generals, the wives, the soldiers. My brother, Chief Petty Officer Justin Vance, wrote this, Logan announced, his voice cracking with raw emotion. He wrote that when the team was pinned down in the Peck Valley, this nurse, this woman, ran into the kill zone 3 times. She didn't have a rifle. She had a med kit. She dragged 3 wounded operators to cover while taking effective fire. A gasp rippled through the room. Chloe covered her mouth with her hand, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. She hadn't known. Justin had never told her he wrote it. He wrote, Logan continued, reading the final lines, that she held the perimeter alone for 20 minutes while he set the demolition charges to destroy the intel. He wrote that if he didn't make it home, he wanted her to have his trident, because she earned it more than half the men in the teams. Logan turned back to Blackwood, who was staring at the letter, defeated. The tattoo isn't a leak, Colonel, Logan said softly, the anger replaced by a fierce pride. It's a receipt. She paid for it in blood, and if you try to arrest her, you aren't just arresting a nurse. You're arresting the only person who kept my brother alive long enough to say goodbye. Blackwood looked at the letter, then at the watching crowd. The room was silent. Generals and privates alike were watching with reverence. To arrest her now would be career suicide. It would be a PR disaster of epic proportions. The letter appears authentic, Blackwood muttered, retreating a step. However, the regulations are waived, a gravelly voice interrupted. The crowd parted instantly. General Marcus Thorne, the base commander, stepped into the circle. He was a giant of a man with 3 stars on his shoulder and a reputation for zero tolerance. He looked at the letter in Logan's hand, then at Chloe's tear-streaked face, and finally at Miller. I think we're done here, Colonel, the general said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Lieutenant Mercer is a guest of honor, and Sergeant Miller snapped to attention, sweating so profusely it was dripping off his nose. Sir. I saw the security footage from the parking lot incident, the general said coldly. Assaulting a superior officer? Intimidation? You're done. MPS, escort the sergeant to the brig. We'll start the court-martial proceedings in the morning. Get him out of my sight." Miller opened his mouth to protest, a whine forming in his throat, but the MPs grabbed him by the arms. He was dragged out of the ballroom, his heels scraping the floor, the same floor he had humiliated Chloe on just 30 hours prior. The doors slammed shut behind him, sealing his fate. The gala continued, but the atmosphere had shifted irrevocably. The frivolous gossip was gone. The room felt heavier, more meaningful. It wasn't a party anymore. It was a vigil. Logan led Chloe away from the staring eyes, guiding her out to the large stone balcony overlooking the parade grounds. The heavy glass doors shut out the noise, leaving them in the cool night air. It smelled of pine needles and impending rain. Chloe walked to the stone railing and gripped it, her knuckles white. She was shaking violently now, the adrenaline crash hitting her hard. "Did he really write that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Or did you make it up? Did you forge it to save me?" Logan joined her at the railing. He pulled the folded paper from his pocket and handed it to her. "I couldn't forge that if I tried." Her hands trembled as she took it. She recognized the handwriting instantly. The messy, hurried scrawl of a man writing on his knee in a vibrating helicopter. The ink was smudged in places. "She's the bravest operator I've ever seen, Lo. She's got more grit than the new guys. If I don't punch out of this one, make sure she's okay. She's family." Chloe let out a sob that tore through her chest, a sound of pure, unadulterated grief. She crumpled, sliding down the railing to the cold concrete floor. The grief she had held back for 4 years, the survivor's guilt, the isolation, the silence. It all broke. The dam shattered. Logan sat down beside her, ruining his dress whites on the dusty floor without a second thought. He didn't try to hush her. He didn't offer platitudes. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her into his chest, shielding her from the world. He held her while she cried for the man they both loved, the ghost that had brought them together. "He loved you," Logan said into her hair, his own voice thick. "He really loved you, Chloe." "I miss him," she choked out, clutching Logan's lapels. "Every day, I look at the mirror and I see the dragon and I just miss him. I should have died in that cellar. It should have been me." "No," Logan said firmly, tilting her chin up so she had to look at him. His eyes were dark, intense, reflecting the moonlight. "He stayed on that trap door so you could live. If you don't live, really live, then he died for nothing. Don't make his sacrifice worthless." They sat there for a long time, the Navy SEAL and the nurse, huddled together against the cold. The barriers were gone. The secrets were out. The weight of the lie she had been living was finally lifted. Finally, Chloe pulled back. She wiped her face, her mascara smudged, her eyes red and puffy. She looked entirely undone, and to Logan, she looked more beautiful in that moment than any pristine debutante in the ballroom. "What now?" she asked, her voice raspy. "Everyone knows. The General, Blackwood. I can't be a ghost anymore. They'll want interviews. They'll want the story." "No," Logan agreed. "You can't be a ghost. You have to be Chloe. You have to live. That's the hard part." He reached out and brushed a stray strand of blonde hair from her face, tucking it behind her ear. "But you don't have to do it alone. My rotation here lasts another 3 months. And after that, well, the teams operate out of Virginia Beach. It's not that far." Chloe looked at him, really seeing him for the first time, not as Justin's brother, but as Logan. She saw the kindness in his eyes, a different kind of strength than Justin's, less reckless, more steady. An anchor. "Are you asking me out, Captain?" she asked, a small, watery smile appearing on her lips. "I'm asking you to stay," Logan said, his hand lingering on her cheek. "I'm asking you to stop running. I'm asking you to let me finish what Justin started, keeping you safe. And maybe finding something new for ourselves." Chloe looked down at her arm. The dragon looked different in the moonlight, less like a monster marking a tragedy, more like a guardian watching over her. She looked back at Logan. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll stay." Logan smiled, a genuine, warm smile that broke the tension. He stood up and offered her his hand. "Come on, I think there's a slow song playing. And I promise to show you off. Let's go finish the dance." Chloe took his hand. She stood up, smoothed her dress, and took a deep breath of the cool air. She wasn't the limping girl from the mess hall anymore. She was the girl with the dragon tattoo, and for the first time in 4 years, she wasn't afraid of the light. 3 months later, the mess hall was quiet. The spot where Sergeant Miller used to hold court was occupied by a group of laughing privates. Miller himself had been dishonorably discharged, his career a casualty of his own arrogance, a cautionary tale told in the barracks. At a corner table, Lieutenant Chloe Mercer sat eating lunch. She wasn't alone in the shadows anymore. Captain Logan Vance sat across from her, stealing her fries and dodging her playful slaps. They were laughing, a sound that carried across the room. When they walked out, nobody stared at her limp. They stared at the engagement ring, catching the light on her finger, and the way the Navy SEAL walked beside her. Not in front of her like a protector, not behind her like a shadow, but right beside her. Partners. We often judge people by their silence, mistaking quiet for weakness and scars for damage. But sometimes the quietest people in the room are the ones carrying the loudest stories. Chloe carried a dragon on her skin and a hero in her heart, proving that true strength isn't about how loud you shout, but about what you can endure and how you choose to live after the smoke clears. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more emotional tales of love, sacrifice, and justice.